Not this time.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Fantasy 420, where today we're going to be discussing some wide receiver free agency winners of the 2019 frenetic free agency period. Today is 5 wide receivers whose 2019 outlook were most helped by the free agency period. While there's still the NFL draft, which are big, especially for the wide receivers. Some of these teams could be taking some, especially early on in the draft, depending on how big the hole is, or preseason games, etc., injuries. So that being said, we can still deduce some people who I believe were winners in this free agency period. And we will be starting with player number 5 and ending with player 1 being the most helped. And that being said, number 5 was still helped a lot. I just believe number 1 was helped most. So with that being said, we'll jump into the first name, and that is Sammy Watkins, the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to preface this by saying I have really never been a big Sammy Watkins fan in fantasy football, never really bought into him. So the fact that I'm putting him on this list is something to consider in its own. The only reason, in my opinion, he isn't higher on the list is because Tyreek Hill hasn't been officially suspended yet. I did predict a 6-game suspension to an 8-game or more suspension, depending on how damning the evidence is that the NFL has against him. But I do think it'll be 6 games because of personal conduct, because he's done this sort of thing before in college. So the more the suspension goes for Watkins, the higher he would go on this list, in my opinion. So I think he could go as high as up to number 2, depending on if it's a 8 or more game suspension. Even if he's not suspended, though, I think the Chiefs had a real plan in mind in order to get him more involved this season. With Kareem Hunt being gone, they lost their number 3 receiver, Chris Conley. They lost Demetrius Harris. I thought they were planning on using Watkins more in their offense in general. He's making a ton of money, and they believed in him since they signed him last year. So their defense also lost a lot of pieces, which means their offense is going to possibly have to do better in 2020. Whether that is possible or not is up for debate. But if Sammy Watkins has a bigger role to a much bigger role, even if the offense isn't as good as last year or effective, he's still a huge winner in this offseason. So the next name we'll be talking about at number 4 is DJ Moore, Carolina Panthers. Aside from Christian McCaffrey, I believe this free agency period set him as their number 2 receiving option for the team. With Devin Funchess being gone and Greg Olsen on his last legs, I do believe that he is the number 1 receiver. It is his second year in the league, so it's one less year than their number 2 wide receiver, Curtis Samuel. Yet he had more catches than Samuel last year in terms of 16 catches, so about 2 games, and around 300 yards, which that's around 3 or 4 games. So that's signaling to me he's a younger and more reliable wide receiver. While Samuel has that breakaway ability, I do expect DJ Moore to be their number 1 more prototypical wide receiver, and I expect him to have a boost going into next year and be a very reliable flex to possibly a wide receiver too. So I think people are sleeping on him a lot early on in this offseason. Next name we'll go to at number 3 is Julian Edelman. I do want to remind everybody he was a top 12 wide receiver when you take into account his average points per game and then add that to his 4-game suspension that we knew he was going to have at the start of the year. I do understand that age 32 is a little bit scary, but he is coming off of that Super Bowl MVP game, so they do, I believe, still plan on leaning on him a lot. Rob Gronkowski just retired, obviously. Josh Gordon didn't work out, and I think he should be inarguably the Patriots' number one pass catcher. Maybe James White is their number one, but I just think people are sleeping on Edelman. He has no suspension to worry about this season or apprehension with his role, his connection with Tom Brady. And I do think they're in possibly the worst division in the NFL. I would say that is the worst division in the NFL. So Edelman should feast next year in that Patriots offense, and feel free to take him based on what the offseason has provided. The second name on the list is going to be Chris Godwin. Adam Humphries did leave and go to the Tennessee Titans, so that secures Godwin in the number 2 role for Tampa Bay. The big reason I like that role is because Bruce Arians just took over as their head coach, and that was my favorite coaching hire of the offseason. Tampa Bay is in a need of a turnaround, and Bruce Arians has completed multiple successful turnarounds as a head coach. Jameis, I've never really liked him in terms of his attitude, his throwing interceptions, his decision making, but hopefully Arians can help him out. And if he can turn into a number 1 pick-esque of talent that he was chosen to be there for, that would be scary. And this offense has a lot of pieces. They also have no running game, so they're going to throw the ball a ton. It would not surprise me if they were, a top 5 throwing team. With Evans, Godwin, and OJ Howard, it's a lot of protection for everybody, and especially Godwin, since Evans or Howard will probably be seeing the majority of the double teams. And I just really think the offseason went really well for Chris Godwin. And then finally, the number 1 most helped player we all knew who was going to be here, Odell Beckham Jr. Obviously, going from the New York Giants to Cleveland was a huge boon to his fantasy value. He is going from a number 1 pick at the very end of his career to a record-setting second-year number 1 pick. So that's pretty good. He's also playing with his best friend in the league now, in Jarvis Landry. Once again, Landry, Njoku, Chubb, and Hunt is going to be the most talent he's ever played with, so he's going to be seeing the least amount of double teams than ever. His division mates only got worse in the offseason, I believe, and they should be contending for that division and definitely winning it, I would predict. And we know Odell Beckham is a fiery personality, and this just adds even more incentive and fuel for the fire. I could keep naming more reasons and going forever. I just think this was the perfect trade for the Browns and Odell Beckham Jr., and I can't wait to see him suit up for next season. With that being said, guys, I really appreciate you all listening to my video. Those are 5 players who I think have been really helped in the offseason and free agency. I'll leave a link to my previous videos in this series and more of my NFL preseason videos that I've put out. And I always appreciate you all for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, and I hope you all have a great day. Talk to you then. Peace.